Thank you so much for joining with us here tonight. It's going to be a special interview. As most of you know, those who have spent decades in prison are usually daily told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and even deliberately removing the inmates' abilities to make choices, which doesn't make for inmates who are really prepared for employment once they are released. And the road to finding employment for those who are released is just it's filled with challenges. Um, there are like so many roadblocks in the way. Many of those roadblocks are in the mind of the inmate, I think, and most have like little idea what it means to be employed. You know, how to trust, how to deal with the demands of parole that can interfere with the work schedule, how to learn new things quickly, how to take directions from a boss, how to use public transportation to be at work on time, how to work with others, and on and on and on. And tonight we're talking with Rob Smith. He is the site director for the Center for Employment Opportunities that's here in San Diego. They are the largest reentry employment provider in the United States. So Rob knows what it is to be incarcerated, as well as what it takes to be at the head of a very busy organization, helping those coming out of prison to find, their purpose. It's hugely important, and also to learn how to be successfully employed. So thank you, Rob, for taking the time out of
Yeah.
your very, very busy schedule to be with us.
Thank
It's
you.
great yeah, thanks. Good to have you here. I'm just going to start off with maybe at the very beginning of things. Can you just tell us a little bit about your upbringing and, maybe include things about your parents, your school, your neighborhood? What was it like growing up as a young person?
Yeah. Yeah. Can everyone hear me okay? I want to make
Yeah,
sure I'm not breaking up.
breaking
Am I
up a
coming through
little.
okay?
It's a little breaking,
Okay.
but
All right. Um, yeah. Yeah. I'm going to maybe go off video and tell me if that's a little bit better, just so I don't get too choppy.
okay.
All right. Hopefully that's a little better.
Yeah, good.
All right. Yeah, no, well, first I want to say thanks for having me here tonight. I appreciate all of the folks on this call, all the interest and all the work. I was fortunate enough to sit in one of your meetings before and got to hear all of the passionate support and individuals that were and have been, coming alongside justice impacted folks, those returning citizens coming home. Um, Sometimes it may not feel like it, but the work for those of you that are, either doing letters to folks on the inside or visiting people on the inside or doing ministry work to those on the inside, it really does leave a lasting impression. And I can talk more
Mm,
about sort of that experience because I've really great experience with volunteers and mentors and individuals like yourself that contributed your time and talents and treasure to my journey in this reentry process. Um, yeah, so I think the question is just about the upbringing. Probably many of you, because you've been doing this work for a long time, you hear the backgrounds of formerly incarcerated individuals, and sometimes it's not a mystery about how they ended up in the system. I grew up in a environment where I had a substance addicted parent that was in and out of incarceration, that was involved in a lot of illegal activity, from selling drugs to running in motorcycle gangs to prostitution, and found themselves constantly in and out of the system.
mm,
Um, from a very early age, I found myself, caught up in child protective services because of my mother being incarcerated, and you end up juggled between foster care and family members. And a lot of the family members that you um, end up with are suffering from the same sort of issues that your
Mm,
parent is, especially when they've come from, a history of trauma themselves. Um, one of the things you won't probably find in my bio is at a very young age, I actually, part of that cycle of victimization was, not just physical and verbal, it was also sexual abuse, and in the system, not just, from community in general, but actually being in child protective services and in foster care. And by the time I was a juvenile, I was already in, juvenile detention, eventually jail, and then ended up in prison.
mm,
Um, and spent, many years being upset and angry and, um, confused in relationships, very unstable in terms of my responsivity to, emotional situations, would have outburst. Um, never made never made situations any better for sure. Um, and didn't have a lot of close relationships that I could maintain to build community. And so being in what we would consider normal society, sometimes you just didn't really have an appeal because you didn't feel like you were a part of society. And in many
mm,
ways, I was angry that I felt that, those that were in charge of my care were, you know, not doing a really good job as a
yeah.
kid. So you kind of take that out on people, even when they're
Mm,
trying to be good to you and trying to mentor you. You just can't see past sort of that rage and
yeah.
disappointment.
Mm,
So yeah, that was my childhood, probably from around 4 years old till I would say about 16.
mhm, mm,
And left home at a very early age and ended up selling drugs at a very early age to
mm,
survive and in and out of a lot of precarious situations. So, but many of you, if you've been doing this work for a while, uh, that's probably not new information for for
no.
many of you.
No, but you have a foundation though that just from that experience, and I know from my own experience, it allowed me to actually have more empathy and actually be actually fairly good at working with people and even liking the people that were doing the things that I had done when I was young, probably like you. You just see things differently when you've had the
Mhm.
experience yourself. I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you though, even though you were going through all that, did you have dreams and goals when you were younger, outside of the just the
Yeah.
the stuff you were
Yeah.
doing?
It's funny. I say this a lot to the folks that come through my program. When you're young, when someone asks you, I remember being, very young, someone saying, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" It's always
Yeah,
something
Rob,
positive
you're
right
breaking
off.
up. You're breaking up a
Uh,
little.
those things, they never really go away. They can,
Yeah. Yeah.
I might be a little unstable. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
My internet said it was unstable. Um, Yeah, I think it's just life circumstances. You end up in situations where, you know, I don't think you lose that drive to be something,
Yeah.
but you take advantage of the opportunities that are afforded you, and you become something. You just become something that isn't part of the social norm,
Yeah.
and you end up in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of want to just jump ahead because to what prison was like for you. Um, what was it like for you when you first went to prison?
It's interesting because you sort of are groomed very early on, right? I mean, you go from juvenile detention, you go from, child protective
Mm,
services, which is a processing system. You go to
mm,
juvenile hall, you're in processing again, jail, right? And then into
mm,
prison.
mm,
The those become normal. Um, the way in which you're handled, the way in which you're processed,
mm,
it's familiar. And in some instances, depending on, I remember being in New York City, and getting arrested in the middle of the winter. And
mm,
in New York, a new jail is better than an old project any day. And
mm,
so, you're getting fed, I mean, I lived in the projects in New York City and the heat goes out, there's no water. You've got holes, from the ceiling upstairs, right? And you got roaches all over the place.
yeah,
You end up in New York City jail and you're warm, you're fed. Um,
mm,
so sometimes it's almost like you're on the outside waiting to go home.
wow. That's I've never heard that one before, but that's interesting. Um, well, what do you think you learned from the experience?
Um, I think that you really walk away with that experience with uh, a level of resiliency and self-determination, and that
Yeah.
trying to find a place to put that,
Mm,
um, you
mm,
know, uh, uh, could be for me, right? It was very awakening to be able to do the work I do with folks that are coming home, and be an anchor for folks that are coming out. Um, so I think, a level of empathy for folks that are going through those similar situations, you know, a level of understanding, and
mm,
forgiveness of, the partnerships that I have now with justice partners. I sit on quite a few committees and work closely with the justice system. And there was for a number of years, even when I came home, there was this tension, um, that I had, in trying to partner with probation or parole, or working with their clients. It was almost like an adversarial relationship. And you know,
mm,
you learn that you're never going to get anything done like that. You're not going to accomplish your ultimate goal, of helping people reintegrate. So,
mm, mm,
some things you learn to let go of. And that's definitely
yeah.
one of the things, because you put a lot behind you.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you is how did you learn to deal with prison culture? And on that question is how is prison culture introduced to a new inmate? Or is it?
Uh, Sorry, say it again.
How is prison culture introduced to a new inmate?
Um, you know,
You just
for
keep your eyes
folks,
open, you're watching what's
yeah,
going on. I mean, you're just
yeah. Well,
absorbing.
yeah, I think for folks that are a little more seasoned,
Yeah.
you sort of go in and knowing what to expect.
Yeah.
But there's all a lot of times, when I was incarcerated, I would see folks coming in that this was their first time in that
Yeah.
setting.
Yeah.
And the way that the prison culture was introduced to them was a shock to the system. Being forced into these narrow groups and these
Mm,
these rules that you a person had done something wrong and they had been
mm,
incarcerated, um,
mm,
but at their core they were not a bad person,
yeah.
but on the inside, you know you find yourself sometimes in groups that you're going to have to do bad things,
Yeah.
and for survival purposes. And
Yeah.
a lot of folks that are incarcerated for the first time that may not have come up in the system, they don't
Hmm.
really know how to navigate those situations. They don't know
Mm.
what really is a sort of, I would say, a bluff in the beginning. I mean, a lot of
Okay.
times we do what's called fishing expeditions. A new guy comes in, and you warm up to them. You have, find out where they're from, find out why they're
Mm-hmm.
incarcerated. You
Mm-hmm.
make friendly with the person. And you're on a fishing expedition. You're trying to find out if there's ways to exploit this individual. Does he have family on the outside? Are they going to be sending him commissary money? Are they putting money on his books?
Mm-hmm.
And people will exploit that uh, because they find out, oh yeah, this guy's, he's going to be doing a 3-year bid. He's got a wife, he's got kids. I mean, I've seen people, like want to see your mail, to find out what your address is. Not knowing ahead of time, like, I would
Mm-hmm.
never, I didn't want people writing me with their home addresses. If you're going to write me, don't put a return address, and I will send your mail to a post office box. If you don't know little
Mm-hmm.
things like that,
Mm-hmm.
um, you could find yourself in some pretty sticky situations because now you're under this threat, right? You got this person that in a gang that has power and influence telling you, well, I know where your family lives. I know where you're mailing letters to. I know who you're writing on the outside, so you
Mm-hmm.
need to, either give me these things or do these things
Right.
to protect yourself and to protect your loved ones.
Yeah. Right.
So there's a level of victimization that goes on in the system um,
Mm.
as part of the
Mm.
culture of prison system.
Mm. Wow. I'm just thinking here as the director of CEO here in San Diego, your life suggests now that something happened to you in prison that enabled you to change your course away from criminal thinking, if you will.
Yeah.
What was
Yeah.
it that motivated you to change course?
I think it was a lot of things along the way that were, when I was in prison, it does give you a moment to stop and think
Mm. Mm.
about, you know, when I looked around, I've always been a relatively clever person. I wouldn't say the smartest guy in the room, but I've been pretty clever and,
Mm.
paying attention has always been, I think, a strong suit of mine. And watching people. I learned very early on at a very young age. I'll just, touch on this for a second. When you're a kid dealing with a drug addicted parent that
Mhm.
is an alcoholic,
Mhm.
you pay a very close attention to mannerisms, right? When mom's had 2 or 3 drinks, she's in a good mood.
Mm.
That's when you can get affection. That's when you can get, you know, attention.
Mhm.
When she's had 8 to 10 drinks,
Mm.
now that mood changes. And, you start to pay attention to
Mm.
the the nonverbal communication that serves you well in prison to keep
Mm.
yourself, alert and pay attention to people's body language, the way people move.
Mm.
I mean, I can be on a prison yard and easily get that feeling of this isn't nothing good is happening out here today. I
Mhm.
might as well
Yeah.
go back to my room. So I
Mm.
think in some sense, those things sort of prepared me early on to read the temperament of individuals
Yeah.
and watching folks that were coming in that were, becoming sort of mealworms. I hate to put it any other way,
Mm.
for, prison gangs and getting chewed up in that culture. Um,
Mhm.
you realize that, well, some realize, I'm glad I realized it a lot earlier, that I had more going for me than that I had at
Mm.
least enough belief in myself and enough trust in that I could find a better way to exist in the world. And,
Mm.
if it wasn't going to be as as a part of a community of people, I would figure out a way to do it on my own. And fortunately, I didn't have to, right? Again, there was volunteers that came in There was, college interns that would send documentation to us about, you know, what are you, going to do when you get out, right? Or are you thinking about, life beyond the prison wall?
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
things allowed me to think
Yeah.
about a different course.
Yeah.
And then seeing lifers, people that were doing life in prison that, took me under their wing and said, "Hey, listen, like you're a smart guy.
Mm,
You're fairly articulate. You blend well with your surroundings. You know, people trust and get along with you. You're an easy guy to talk to. You may want to think about, doing something with that." Um,
mm-hmm.
and those are things that I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I'll, you know, help people. I started doing helping people on the inside,
Mm,
and then found a passion for it.
yeah. Well, I love hearing that. Were you looking into your heart and just sort of seeing things that you just didn't want there anymore? I mean, how did I call it transformation.
Mhm.
How did that occur for you? Because that doesn't just happen, does it? I mean, you were
No,
they said rightly, you were a smart guy. You're very articulate, obviously.
yeah,
Um, but you had to look in. There's smart people still have to look in and say,
yeah,
there's some things in me that I just don't want in me.
yeah,
That's not going to work when I get out of here. I don't know if
yeah.
you were thinking that way, but were you?
Well, I was having some realization that what I'm doing isn't
Mm,
working, and I need to do something different. Um, and
yeah.
even though I might have some talent and be a clever young man at the time, not so young anymore, um, I I knew that I didn't want to end up. I remember a gentleman coming in, and I was between court dates, and um, I remember being in this holding cell with this gentleman, and he was probably a few years older than I am now, probably closer to his 60s. And, he was real combative with the corrections officers. And, he
Mm,
has said something that just for me, I thought, wow, like this is the guy I'm gonna be. And he
mm,
was saying, and telling his lawyer, there isn't a hard time invented that I can't do. um and I
wow.
just thought to myself that
Wow.
i i I don't want to end up that bitter and that with that people having that much control over me. And so sometimes those turning points were from the folks that
Mm,
weren't the best role models, but like I said, I was a clever guy.
mm,
Either I'm going to be a good example, or they're going to make a good example of me. And
wow.
I didn't want that level of control over me anymore.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you obviously did something different because you're certainly helping a lot of people now. And what were some of the specific challenges, if you could just in yourself that I just can't live with that?
Yeah. I mean, to this day, right? You got to practice humility. Got to be persistent. You got to be open.
So what does that
Um,
mean, humility? When you said practice humility,
um,
what did that look like for you then and there?
yeah, I mean, as a young person, uh, you know, by the time I was 18, 19 years old, I was relatively really good at selling drugs and, had a
Hmm.
certain lifestyle and had a
Hmm.
certain status, in my community.
Hmm.
And, you saw myself in a certain way. And I can
Yeah.
not deal with um, that trauma and tragedy, right, from my past, right? I could go out all night, I could party, I could buy things, I could numb that pain.
Mm,
And even to this day, like I'm 54 years old now, it probably was until 52, 53 that, I'm doing some work with my therapist and, had to still come to some very had a
Mm,
humbling experience about, the way I'm dealing with confrontation in, even in my professional life, my personal life.
mm-hmm.
Um, and, I'm a very stubborn person. So I think I got all the answers and I don't want to, see other people's points of view. So, being humble in that
Mm,
sense was a real challenge, right? And because you get locked into this feeling of, and just have this repeat in your head, like I don't trust you to give me good advice. I don't trust, people to have my best interest at their heart,
mm,
with
mm.
no sort of manipulative uh, uh, reasoning.
Yeah,
So, that still to this day, I think that's
yeah.
sort of in my space, what helps me stay sharp in my, ability to connect with the clients we connect with, because I'm not
Mm,
too far removed from those feelings about, being very
yeah.
skeptical of others and not trusting and just knowing what that feels like, and having to fight that on a daily basis.
Hmm. Yeah, but I've watched you at work too, which is interesting because I see the people how the people you work with respond to you, and there's a lot of respect, and you don't just get respect out of just having a position. So you've definitely done some nice work there, I would say.
Yeah, I most of the time, my staff at this point, no, I mean, I don't usually introduce myself as the director of the office. Mostly when I meet folks
Mhm.
in the program for the first time, I'm, pushing the trash can around, right? I'm, training the janitor how to clean up the building.
Hmm.
That's how I got started in this business on the outside, was a volunteer position, cleaning toilets. And to this day, I remember even just that trust. I remember being granted the keys to, these locked rooms, and given, alarm codes. And, for me, that was a new experience to be trusted
Yeah.
that way. And, so to this day, I know what it is to have that very small kind of like win, that grows as a seed of, okay, I'm a different person. I can be a different person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, definitely done something good in your life. So tell us about CEO. CEO, just for people that don't know, is a Center for Employment Opportunities.
Yeah.
And maybe just tell us, what does the organization do? Who do you serve? What are your objectives?
Yeah. Well, we try to do one thing and do it well. As people are reentering society, try to get them prepared for the world of work. And we do that by putting them to work. They actually work for us. Annually, we're probably up to about 10,000 people a year that we employ across the country. We have 31 offices and throughout different states and cities. And we have the same model across the country.
Mhm.
When people come home, one of the immediate barriers to, them being able to take care of themselves, right, is having a job. And so we
Yeah.
provide immediate employment to that individual. So you get out on a Monday, you could walk in my office and literally be hired on a Tuesday and
Wow.
start working on Friday. Uh,
Wow.
so that's, our model. We do that really well this year. Our office will have about 500 people here in San Diego that we will work with directly, and 50% to 60% of those will get a job, and then 50% of those will keep that job for remain in the workforce for up to 12 months. And we
Mhm.
support them through that entire journey of the ups and downs of, trying to resocialize and trying to do that at work.
Yeah.
You know, it's tough enough just trying to enter society and being around other parolees or probationers, right? Because we come home and we live in these halfway houses or these sober living communities, but at least there's some commonality, right? When I go to work, I may not have anything in common, right, with all the people that are at work. I may have, and to some sense, I remember myself, the first 6 years I was home. I had moved up in the organization that I worked for originally, re pretty quickly. I'm a hard worker and
Hmm.
was a dedicated, person to the cause.
Hmm.
But I wasn't fully functional in society. Right. I was doing really well at work. But some of the folks would be like, hey, let's, go out for um, you know, okay. Well, then happy hour turned into, all weekend drinking for me, right? At least I wasn't out on the streets, but that would just consume myself, with
Right.
work. And I would just, be on the computer, be, doing work
Yeah.
and not growing, as
Yeah.
a fully functioning person in society. And
Hmm.
so, a lot of our folks say they come home, they get a job, and then they realize, I don't fit in at work, that I don't fit in at my house. My kids, I don't know who my kids are. They're grown now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a very lonely and isolated place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that self-isolation is one of the issues that we've had to deal with, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you guys see that every day
Yep.
in some form or
Yeah.
fashion.
Yeah. Yeah. So even, in their success of finding work and keeping a job,
Yeah.
if we're not really cognizant about, are they active? That's why we do this year. We have an event that we will be doing. It's a holiday breakfast for their family and their
Mm.
children. So we have corporate sponsors that donate gifts, toys. And then we have one of our
Mm.
staff persons. They dress up as Santa. It's one of our formerly incarcerated. I have a staff of about 20 people. About, I would say, a little more than half are justice impacted folks.
Mm.
Uh, One of them will dress up as Santa Claus. One will dress up as Mrs. Claus, and we'll give out gifts. And we have a catered. It's a catered event, and we serve folks, the clients in our programs. We serve them the food, and the idea is it's great, right? There's actually a science behind why we do this. Um,
Mm.
I remember when people were coming to visit me and seeing me in a prison uniform, how upsetting that was for them, right? How
Yeah.
disappointed they were, not just in me, but and themselves, right? Some people blame themselves as family members, and so they're living with this grief. Now, the person is you're visiting their work, you're visiting their colleagues, you're
Hmm.
talking to their boss, and their boss has all these congratulatory things to say, right, about their success.
Mm.
It helps with the socializing and the normalcy. And we want people to know what that feels like to see their family proud of them.
Yeah.
And the toys
Yeah.
that we get donated, we know people are struggling that time of year
Hmm.
to go to a Christmas party, right? To give their kids gifts. And
Yeah.
so we have about 200 clients that show up. Each one of them have probably about, on an average, two kids. So it's a lot of toys.
Yeah.
We have a whole room that's filled with toys and Santa Claus, and we have gift wrapping stations for kids to, if they want to wrap the gifts and take them home and
Mm.
put them under a tree if they have a tree. If they don't, they can take pictures with our Christmas tree. And it really is. There's a method behind that for that reintegration to normalize that I I have a
Mm,
job. I have community at my work. I'm hanging out with positive people.
yeah.
Family reintegration or community reintegration, it needs those kinds of things.
Yeah. What's the first thing that you guys do when with somebody new that comes into your office?
Well, the first thing we try to do is find out what challenges or barriers that person might have.
Yeah.
It sort of really depends on how quickly we can move them into
Mm,
full-time employment. If a person is homeless, if a person um, has literacy issues, is or cognitive disabilities,
mm,
we have to assess, is CEO the right program for them? The last thing we want to do is cause harm. And then, so try to really be very person centered about what this person can accomplish,
yeah.
and not inflate, I need you to get a full-time job when a
Yeah.
part-time job is really what they need, because they can't take the pressure, right, of a full-time job, of that kind of responsibility. Um,
Mhm.
they're just trying to reintegrate with their kids and um, get them off to school on time is overwhelming. So really and truly just trying to
Yeah.
assess each individual, where they're at, what their needs are, and then build what we consider to be an individual sort of plan for them,
Yeah.
with their, here are their goals. Do you want to,
Yeah.
some people want to be a truck driver, right? And so
Yeah.
that they're going to have to go to commercial driver's license school.
Right.
And we try to enroll them into a program that best fits that need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and some people just want to work in a kitchen and be a cook,
Mm.
right? And so we
Hmm.
get them their food handlers card and OSHA certifications. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, just really trying to meet the individual on their terms.
And coaching each of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of coaching, even if they know what they want to do. They know
Mm.
that they want to drive a truck.
Yeah.
There's still things that um, uh, their ability to follow directions, their ability to take constructive criticism, um, to have to be able to manage conflict
Yeah. Yeah.
productively.
Yeah.
All of those things, one or all could be a challenge. And so
Yeah.
we work on, and it's through our work program, right? Because as soon as they're enrolled, they're going to be placed into a team of 6 to 8 people. And those are all different personalities. They're going to have
Mm.
to, deal with different races. If they're
Mm.
just coming home from incarceration, that's very tough to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Women are being placed on crews with men that
Mm.
may have, been a victim of domestic violence. And this guy reminds me of my ex, right? And so
Mm.
now she's overwhelmed and stressed.
Mm.
The guys have, sexual harassment is something I have to deal with on a constant basis, right? Because they make lewd comments.
Yeah.
Um, and, of course, you're at work and you can't sexually harass the people you work with.
Yeah.
And so that's us counseling. So there's all kinds of
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
one-on-one coaching.
Well, I was going to ask you here that, we have a lot of folks, or not a lot, but we have some folks that have encountered, they've encountered serious trust issues just from long-term incarceration. That they might get a job, but then they have those trust issues outside of work that impacts their work.
Yeah.
How do you guys deal with those folks? And I know from your own experience, you probably have some pretty important things that you can teach and pass along.
So I think I'm going to make sure I understand your question.
Well, I'm just saying, how would you deal with folks that've got trust issues that when they go home, those trust issues could actually impact their work in
Yeah.
some ways.
I mean, we're constantly trying to work on or focus on problem solving, pro-social behavior, for social readiness.
Hmm.
And a lot of the science behind what we do. I'm a big fan of treatment modalities,
Hmm.
such as like cognitive behavioral skills, integrated behavioral strategies, motivational interviewing. Um, you know, one being non-judgmental, right? You have trust issues. I'm not going to judge you based on this, pattern of your trust issues.
Yeah.
I do want to find out what it is. What is it that is triggering your trust issue?
Hmm.
And then provide a very short level of engagement. If it's a more deep-rooted situation that requires longer term therapy, or try to assess, is this just I don't know if you're all familiar with CBI, cognitive behavioral interventions.
Hmm.
Um, those are really meant to be short and not long in duration, like psychotherapy. Um,
Hmm.
and try to work through, how is this trust issue benefiting you in the long run? And if it's not benefiting you, do you want to keep that trust issue because it's yours to keep? But if
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
want a different outcome, what would you be willing to do differently? And then realize that you're going to get let down, right? Actually have real conversations with folks. People are going to make mistakes. And if every mistake you're waiting for that next shoe to drop,
Hmm.
you are sometimes setting this relationship up for failure, because
Yeah.
you're not going to be you'll, oh, I knew I shouldn't have trusted you. You didn't do what you say you were going to do.
Yeah.
So trying to teach people to also look at, with empathy in themselves, in in that other person, especially family members, like family members that haven't done time. Um,
Hmm.
these trust factors may not be as big. Like this is like, oh, okay, you made a mistake. I'm sorry. Oh, okay, fine. Right. But for people who've been incarcerated, sometimes those could be exacerbated.
Yeah. Um, we are actually we're at the time now where we have our audience can ask you questions. I did want to ask you one quick thing though, if we can just do this before we have anybody asking. If you
Yeah.
could create an angel team, and I know we've talked about that here in San
Mhm.
Diego, who would you want to have on that team? Who do you think would be a good team members? Not individuals, but what would be the scope of their work? What do you think would be very helpful in terms of creation of an angel team? The ideal
Yeah.
angel team.
Yeah. Um, in the nonprofit sector, I don't know if we have a lot of nonprofit people on here, but in the nonprofit sector, one of the things we always say is time, talent, and treasure. People that have time, people that have talent, and
Mm,
you don't have to be rich, but small treasures are sometimes invaluable. A trip to the ballpark, uh, you know,
mm,
uh, a dinner out, and it doesn't have to be a fancy dinner, right? It could be something like In-N-Out Burger,
mhm.
where you can engage an individual.
Yeah,
People that aren't afraid to sit across the table with someone and just listen to their story, and
yeah.
try to understand where that person is coming from. And really and truly, what I've seen in a lot of folks, uh, is there's so much good intention, and there's so
Hmm.
much wisdom that people have, and they want to share it so fast. And a lot of
Yeah.
times they share it without it being solicited. Oh, yeah, let me tell you for an example, right? My boss is a jerk. I really can't stand this guy. He's a fucking idiot. I want to quit my job. Well, a,
Mm,
a lot of folks, I will hear them, well, don't you got rent to pay? How are you going to take care of your kids? You just keep your
mm,
job because you have
mm,
responsibilities. Uh, Even though that's natural and that's a
mm.
very normal way of communicating, um, it a lot of time isn't well received on the person's side, and it's very triggering to them.
Yeah,
Versus, wow, you had a really rough day at work. Oh, tell me about that. Right? And just let
mm,
them get it out, right? Let them
yeah,
talk. Hey, I'm this. Oh, wow, your coworker really doesn't understand where you're coming from. Yeah, that's right. My coworker's a jerk and he doesn't listen to me, and my boss takes his side all the time. That's really frustrating. Oh,
Mm,
I've got plenty of years of work experience, similar experiences like that. If you're
mm,
interested, I could tell you how I dealt with it.
yeah,
Now
yeah,
you're volunteering to say, okay, if you want to know, and if the
yeah,
person wants to know, they'll ask. But if they
yeah,
don't want
right.
to know, then don't give it to them,
They
right?
won't.
But allow them to seek that information for themselves,
Yeah,
and come to those realizations is very empowering and then
yeah.
affirming. Oh yeah. I'll just pick on someone that's on my screen, Bonnie. I don't know you, Bonnie, but I'll pick on you because you're the face on my screen. Bonnie, I'm sure has an experience she can share with me about work and not having a good day at work. She gives me that
Mm,
advice and then asks me, well, I don't know if that's helpful at all, but hopefully, you can use something out of that. Oh, yeah,
yeah,
you know what? I think I can, right? Oh, that's great, right? I'm glad that you found my experience helpful. Um, you know, I'm glad that you were able to, take away something from this. Just affirm that, they listened, that they were open and receptive to having another point of view, and leave it at
yeah,
that. Go back to eating the
yeah,
burgers and fries.
yeah,
And then, a month from now, follow up. Hey, how'd that thing work out at work? Oh, it worked
yeah,
out great. You
yeah,
you killed it. Good job.
yeah, yeah. One of the things that we found out now, we've been doing this for about 6 years. We started out as sort of a rescue mission, and we found that that is definitely not the work here. So, uh, just so people know, and I know you know this, but just want to reiterate that this is a long-term situation. Angel teams should be long-term, and
Yep.
that to me is just we're seeing that with Angel team members now, and it's working out so much better, I think, because people now start to trust the relationships. It's not going to
Yeah.
be just a one and done kind of a thing, or okay, now
Mhm.
you're better, goodbye, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. It's like actually, we really do like you. We kind of want you in our life.
Yeah.
That's a lot of I think
Yeah.
what you're
And
saying as
it
well.
builds, you're building hopefully the next generation of folks that when they hit that self-actualization phase, right, they can
Mhm.
carry the torch
Yeah,
of joining these angel teams. I mean,
yeah,
if as a volunteer, also to answer, I think part of your question is the type of folks that I always look for are folks that are the forever learner. Um, there's a ton of evidence-based practice out there that really does work, that has a lot of data and scientific, you know, modeling behind it. And people that are interested in learning those practices and then figuring out how to master them. And the funniest thing is some of the ones that, they don't need, you don't have to be a licensed marriage family therapist to know how to do motivational interviewing with clients. You don't have to be a licensed clinical social worker to, understand how to have a person-centered conversation. And so
exactly.
people that are interested in learning really how to do that, I always enjoy having those folks on my team.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Rob. I'm going to turn this over to Gabriel. He can find those folks that have questions for you, Rob. So
Yeah.
get ready.
Well, go ahead and raise your hand if you would have a question for Rob. And if you want to also just type something into the chat, you're welcome to. And we'll start with you, Catherine.
Hi. And call me Kathy unless you're upset. It's one of those names. If you use my middle name, then I'll know you're really upset. Just a couple of quick things. Rob, you might want to reach out to Toys for Tots because they do
Yep.
give free toys to organizations like yours where you're doing a holiday event. So that's number one. Number two, my question actually is this. When you're working with these folks that you're mentoring, are you also counseling them on how to interview, how to wear something that picks up the color of their eyes, how to do a handshake, those kinds of basic things?
Mhm. Yeah. So every morning, if you're close to San Diego, you're more than welcome to stop in and sit in a group and see sort of how we do these things. We have an open door policy. You're all invited. Um, so in the morning time at 9 o'clock, because we start our group at 9, we usually open the door about 8:55. Every person is greeted by a staff person, and they're given feedback right in that moment. So you're walking into the business, and this is a regular office setting. You shake someone's hand, you say good morning, you look them in the eye, you project your voice, what you're wearing, you get a little critique, right? It took your individual, right? Every person has a unique style of their own. But we do that every single morning. That's the first thing we do when we have folks in the office. And we have usually about 20 people. Our active census is about 140 individuals. So right now we have 140 individuals that are working for us. Those individuals will stay with us in their transitional jobs for probably about, I would say, 45 days, and then they're off into unsubsidized work. So they'll get jobs at grocery stores, they'll get jobs at the shipyard, construction companies, etc. And so that rolling census of about 140 is active all the time. So we have anywhere from 15 to 25 people in the building every day doing exactly what you said, practicing their interviews, getting critique on their presentation skills. They have to have like a 30-second commercial about themselves to talk about, why they're a good fit for this job. And then give because people always say, "Oh, I'm a hard worker." Well, that's not going to get you the job. You have to give me an example of what hard work looks like. I'm a people person. I work well by myself. Those are buzzwords. So we have them unpack those things and we practice and marry that to their prior experience. So I'm a hard worker. For example, at my last job, I did construction work and I was responsible for the cleanup and my pushing the wheelbarrow and carrying 50 pounds of concrete. Okay, now I got a picture of how hard worker you are.
Yep.
Let's go with you, Bonnie. And you're muted.
Okay, there we go. I think this has been fascinating, and I've been working with a gentleman that's come out recently who is unusual. He was arrested at age 14, incarcerated at 16, and he's 44, and was falsely accused. But this isolation syndrome, I don't have a problem communicating with him, but he doesn't know how to follow up and the importance of it. And I've told him that there's two people, one who's going to work with him to do podcasts, and the other one's going to be managing his money when the lawsuit against the state for the false incarceration takes place, to manage the money for him. But he wouldn't follow up with either of them. And I said, they're going to lose their trust in you if you don't stay in touch with them. And I said, I understand. I mean, this was sort of my own conclusion, but that when you're in prison, you have your self-talk and you don't have to have anybody else involved in it. And so there is this, you're accustomed to just being with yourself and managing what's ever going on. But I would like to know anything further that you can talk about on this isolation syndrome.
Yeah. I would for me, I would want to know more about his stay incarcerated. Was he isolated in admins, and segregated at ADSEG, or was he in general population? Did he have jobs? Did he have hobbies on the inside? Were there anything? What were some of the activities that he did do? Would he work in the laundry? Did he work in maintenance, yard work? Those would be all the kind of things I
He
would
just froze up
try to
there.
gather. Yeah.
Yeah, he's unusual. He got his GED in prison. He got his associate bachelor's degree, and he's been studying law.
Yeah.
And once he is out and his record is vacated, he will be going for his law bar to be a bar test and
Yeah.
become an attorney and to deal with people like his own situation and
Yeah.
for young people to stay out of trouble.
Right.
But he just but so he was studying a great deal. He told me how the gangs run the prison and what goes on. And he said, but he would just walk across the yard. And I said, well, how did you stay out of trouble? And he said, I just kept my head down and I had my books under my arm and I just walked across the yard and nobody bothered him. So
Yep.
I'm just, and I've had him over for dinner one night and we had a really good conversation. But I just, because he's out and he has a full-time job, he's
Yeah.
working 18 hours a day and getting time and a half on the overtime and bought himself a truck and was able to find a house to rent without any questions about his background.
Yeah.
But there's just some socialization that he needs to learn. And I'm just concerned. I don't want to end up mothering him, but
Yeah.
but I want to be able to guide him.
Mhm.
So I just appreciate advice and this isolation, this security in being isolated.
Like again, I don't have a lot of information on the individual. So it's hard to you and I would probably have to talk more offline to kind of get an understanding of because things that I'm hearing are very positive. He has a job, he's working.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of job it is, but I have to imagine he's working around people. And he managed at least his money well enough to be able to find a place to live, navigate however he did that without a background check. So the perception of him has to be pretty good because
Yeah.
right they didn't even or they didn't run the background at all. So he came across, well.
Mhm.
And it sounds like he's very focused and goal oriented. He knows what he wants to
Yeah.
do and has a plan of when when this happens, I'm going to do X. Um, you know, I don't know if it's isolation or if it's I want to do it my way and
Mm.
because I have X amount of years of doing it that way. And for your example, like I had my books under my arm and I walked across the yard. Um, these things work for me and they worked for him in a very tested situation, right? That's a very contentious situation to be in. So to some degree, right, he has a fortified kind of view of if I do it my way, it's going to work. I got my GED, I got my secondary degree. So yeah, I don't know if it's isolation or if it's a little bit of I know what I want and I'm going to do it the way I want to do it.
That's very much, he is that. In fact, the attorney that's representing him in this process of vacating his record uh, is prepared to take him into her law firm.
Mhm.
I mean, he's already had that
Yeah,
available to him.
yeah,
And uh, but he still has some rough edges. And
yeah,
and
yeah.
they're not, I mean, and David and Gabe met him at the conference this
Mm,
last spring.
mm.
And he had only been out of prison like 4 days when I took him to Washington, D.C. with me. He'd never been in
Uh,
a plane. Uh, and I paid for him to be able to go. But he just blossomed at that conference
yeah,
because he just realized he was an individual with purpose and he wasn't a number. Um, but like I said, I want to be able to guide him, but I don't want to take away
yeah.
from him. And he speaks well, although I
Mm-hmm.
reminded him that ain't isn't a word. Um, but I just, it's rather, I don't think it's delicate, but it's just integrity
Yeah.
and giving value to him, additional value to him in his direction and purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure he sees the genuineness in your relationship with him. And sounds like he's created some parameters and boundaries that are a little tough to get through.
Mhm.
And one of the things we do, like I said, when we're meeting individuals where they're at, my focus on recidivism and trying to see if as a person I'm working with a high risk for recidivism due to criminal intent, due to lack of access. What it sounds like is this gentleman isn't. He sounds like he really has a goal, something in
Right.
mind, and this opportunity at the law firm, this is purpose for him. This would be the person I would say that you have talked to other people, and then the attention, because he's going to figure those things out when he gets into his law firm. He's going to build relationships out of necessity, right? To work with the people in the firm. He's going to, navigate those financial situations in some way, right, wrong, or indifferent. But it doesn't sound like if he was to navigate that lawsuit incorrectly or spend that money on something he shouldn't spend it on, um, it's a risk that we just have to say, hey,
Well, and
better next time.
I met him as a chaplain in the prison.
Yeah.
And uh, when we met with the financial manager, the first thing he said to him is, you're going to have to learn to say no, and you're going to have to be able to have a budget. I mean, he immediately was guiding him, although Charles is already budgeting himself and managing his money. He's working for an extermination company.
Mm.
And
Good for him.
they've already given him responsibility over two other people that would be working with him. So he's very disciplined. But he spent 30 years. He lost his
Yeah.
childhood and adolescent years in prison. And so there's still a growing experience that's there other than
Mhm.
his intellectual abilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. 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 I can't wait to meet him maybe one day.
I hope you can. He would like it. His name is Charles Jones, which isn't hard to remember. So anyway, thank you for this presentation today. It was very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. And thank you, Kathy, earlier for your question. So change your Zoom name if you want people to call you Kathy. Let's see, do we have any other questions for Rob tonight?
Do they have an office in this area, the Midwest, in the Kansas City area?
Yes, we do have an office in let me see here. In the Midwest. I don't know how close to you that we have an office. Let me
I'm in
tell
Kansas
you.
City. I'm in Kansas
Mhm.
City.
Yeah. Yeah, we do have offices in the Midwest. You're in Kansas City. I have my site open here. I think probably, oh man, Kentucky, Tennessee, Oklahoma. Nothing in Kansas.
Okay. Okay. One of the things that I did with the prisoners, we had a Christmas meal for them.
Yep.
I put that
Yeah.
together, and those prisoners all came shaved, clean clothes,
Yeah.
and their eyes were completely different because they were just sparkling with excitement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were being treated as normal people.
Yeah.
It was really an insight into the prison.
Yeah, it definitely can be, for sure.
Mhm.
Hey, Rob, I got another question that I didn't get a chance to ask, but I can
Yeah.
now. So, what assignments would you give inmates who want to succeed once they're released? What would you have people do on the inside?
Yeah. I mean, what I've seen, at least in terms of the research that I really think works, is cognitive behavioral skills assignments. Daily thought journaling, write down
Yeah,
situations,
yeah,
process that,
yeah.
that emotional reaction, that behavioral outcome, identify alternatives that might lead to a different outcome. Um, I think,
Yeah.
cognitive behavioral interventions, there's a lot of science to show that
Mhm.
has success with teaching them problem solving scenarios, real world dilemmas, disagreements,
Mhm.
any disagreement. You could be, I disagreed with this guy who's an inmate. Well, you may have disagreements with an employer when you get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
How will it work out so well for you? How would you navigate that differently next time?
Yeah.
And then, like, again, I always coach people, avoid, if they give the wrong answer, like, because a lot of us may know the right answer, but let's say, well, if that guy argues with me, well, I mean, I'm going to let him know. I'm going to let him know. You don't just respect me like that. Oh, okay, that's one way to do it. What will be the outcome? What could be the potential outcomes of you
Yeah.
making sure that employer respects you?
Mm.
Oh, you couldn't lose your job. Yeah, that could happen too. I don't know if that's your goal. Is that your goal? Right? I ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Doing that. I think the other is employment readiness assignments. The mock interview application process. Resume writing. Even if people say, "Oh, I'm in prison for 10 years," find anything that they've done. When I was incarcerated, I made chessboards and chess pieces, and
Mm.
that's how I funded, my snacks, right, and got stamps. Because I was being creative, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that was a inventory control, customer service management skill, right?
Yeah.
I had to take an order. I had to have that order had a deadline, right? That order had a price based on the type of material they wanted. So, there's a lot of skills. I think a lot of people don't realize all the time that some people sitting there and they're drawing, right? Well, are you drawing envelopes? A lot of
Mm.
inmates will draw in on the envelope. I don't know if you guys have gotten letters from
Mhm.
prison. It may be very
Mhm.
artful. Someone
Yep.
else may have drawn that, right? And they paid them in chips to do it. Well, the guy that was drawing it, that's a skill, right? He had a
Yeah.
customer base and he was providing a product. So yeah, I would say try to elicit things that they've done in prison. And even if
Right.
they've gone to school, right? That's education, that's school.
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
just empty time, to get your law. For instance, Charles, right? He got his degree. That
Right.
he went to college, right? It
That's a
wasn't
big
empty
deal.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, if you have the opportunity to role play, a lot of role play is a really strong skill building, role play scenarios, either for jobs or disagreements, and anything that has to do with like literacy, education, uh,
Yeah.
you know, learning to summarize even an article down to 3 sentences that read the newspaper. It's hard for, if I'm watching it, it's hard for me to do it, right? To summarize the whole 5 o'clock news down. You might go, what happened on the news today, right? Oh, let me get people, sorry if
Mm.
my internet is going out again. Yeah, so those are some of the things that I would say. And then, of course, reentry assignment, have them, 90 days, 180 days,
Right,
to release, and then have them really talk about those barriers and kind of that solutions mapping of sort of their social situation,
right,
challenges, transportation, family reintegration, so that they're
right,
not, they may be, their family's been coming to see them on the inside all these years. Um, and that 30-minute, an hour maybe meeting is going to be very different now that I'm with you 12 hours a day. I'm
right,
eating up the food. I don't have a job yet. I have weird behaviors and patterns. My kids, they hug me in the room, but now that they're home, they're on their devices. They're getting short, they're teenagers, right? We all know what teenagers act
yeah,
like. That's a very different skill as a parent, to walk through. So I think having them actually write those things out as potential risk for trigger, right?
yeah.
And then anything you can do for pro-social engagement, letters of gratitude.
Hmm.
One of the exercises I used to do was have individuals write themselves a letter and hang on to that letter. You write yourself a letter, and then at the day you're leaving, right, you mail that letter out to yourself. Uh,
Hmm.
and on the outside, you can revisit, okay, right, I didn't just take this mail with me. This came to my home. This is something that I wrote to myself about my goals, my aspirations, my vision for a better future. Have them put that on their wall. Wherever you're at, put that on
Yeah.
your wall. And am I
Mm.
moving closer to these aspirations, or is my behaviors moving me further away from those things?
Mm.
And then
Thank you.
anything wellness, self-management, learn some yoga, breathing exercises,
Right.
all the things they're going to need on the outside.
Yep. That's good. Appreciate it. Thank you. And Elisa,
Okay, and I'm here with the cat. Uh, so Rob, thank you so much for sharing freely and helpfully your experience. Have you found that there's any spiritual element that has been that you either include in your program or encourage you guys to do as part of success for staying out? Like, do you
Yeah.
encourage you guys to um, rediscover their whatever spiritual roots they might have, and they might not have any?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, that's about meeting individuals where they're at. If I talk to someone like Charles, who I now have his name stuck in my head, who um, Bonnie met as a chaplain. I mean, that was a pillar of strength for him on the inside. That was a foundation. Um, I would always follow up with him about, you know, how's that going on the outside, right? Has he found communities of faith that he's comfortable in? And if people weren't, to find out what is sort of their personal faith, higher power, because every individual, right, is different. And yes, there are some folks that don't have any, and they aren't seeking that. Um, so I don't we don't really broach things that individuals don't bring to the table as often. Um, it's sort of my practice.
Thank you.
And Kathy, I saw your hand was up again.
Thank you. Bonnie, I just had a quick suggestion for you. You might get him involved in Toastmasters. It's an international club where they actually teach you to speak, public speaking. And that's the quickest way to get rid of that A word that we don't want him using, because somebody will actually use one of those clickers that you use for dog training. And every time you say a word or you pause or you use a verbal filler such as am, clicky, 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 clicky. And let me tell you, very quickly, he's not going to be doing any of those. As a lawyer, he needs to speak perfectly. Okay, just a thought.
Thank you.
I can tell you from experience that that works. At our last, in Washington, D.C., at our conference, I had a gentleman come up to me, Marshall, that's you, and tell me that I said 32 times. I wasn't expecting that, but I'll tell you, it really did. It really did resonate. It really stayed with me. Because here I am saying it again. No, I don't say it too much, no. Thank you, Marshall.
Let's see, do we have any other questions for Rob before we wrap it up for tonight? And
I just want to say thank you, Rob. I mean, this is like just the beginning. You're kind of like a huge library. Uh, kind of, we didn't tap a ton, but we certainly got, I think, an awful lot of good stuff here. And just so people know, Rob is on our advisory board. So he's a very valuable member of the advisory board. And
Thank you.
don't forget, Rob, we got a meeting coming up. When is it? Next Monday. So
Yeah. No, thanks for having me, and I appreciate it. And again, we have a open door policy. If you're ever in San Diego and want to make a field trip down and um, be a part of our activities, you're more than welcome. Again, we have our annual event coming up in December. We have a turkey drive that we do in November for families. So give out turkeys, give out toys, serve food to
Low country in the year of 8
people.
Oh, the
You're more than welcome to come down.
thank you.
yeah, well, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in tonight. Just a reminder, as I mentioned before, we will be meeting again in 2 weeks on Thursday, the 16th, for our Angel Team meeting, where we kind of get into a lot of the nuts and bolts about how can we support success in reentry and what does that look like, particularly as we get to a more distributed models of that, and what does a remote Angel Team look like? What can people bring to the table? And we've got some exciting direction that we are headed on that front. So if you can make it, we'd love to see you. Just a reminder, the video for this will be posted at embracedfully.org/videos, hopefully in the next couple of days. And Rob, thanks again so much for your time tonight.
Is it real quick before we jump off, Gabriel and David, would you mind staying on just for a minute? I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things.
Yep, no
Absolutely.
problem. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Night.
Thank you all.